Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meet the Truth. I'm Jason Barrett, pharmacist, founder of CarnivRx, and just like you, someone who's had to fight through years of frustration with my health. I was sick, inflamed, and overwhelmed by the endless advice from experts and diets that never worked. Then I discovered the simplest, most powerful truth about food, and it completely turned my life around. This podcast is where we cut through the lies, butcher the myths, and serve you the truth about health, performance, and living strong. So if you've ever felt lied to about food, or you're just ready for a simpler way to feel alive again, you're in the right place. This is Meet the Truth, and today I'm sharing how meat saved my life. So let me just start from the top. I am from Oklahoma. I'm a farm boy. I was raised in a small town, Holdenville, Oklahoma, out in the country. And I will say I was a 90s kid. It was a great time to be alive because this is before social media. This is before the internet and Wi-Fi and all these fancy devices really, that are attention grabbing it starting at a young age. I didn't have that. And I lived way out in the boonies in the country. And so when I got bored, I just went outside. I just went outside and found something to do. And what a great way to start life is, because I always had animals. I was surrounded by cats and dogs. We had chickens, we had pigs. My dad's a cattle rancher, so we had plenty of cattle. I love sports. I played basically all the sports that were available to me there, mostly baseball, basketball, football, soccer, and a few others. But I've always been an avid fisherman. I've always enjoyed hunting. I've been doing that since I was a little kid, and it's something that I really enjoy. We had a huge yard. We had fruit trees. We had a vegetable garden. We grew a ton of fresh produce, and we really mostly ate just homegrown stuff. I mean, farm to table stuff right there from our own farm, and it was great. My interest, why, I became a pharmacist, obviously, and what really piqued my interest there was when I was still young. I was probably 11 or 12. My younger sister, she got sick out of nowhere, and at first nobody knew what was going on. She was very lethargic. She couldn't even get up, really. I mean, she'd sleep all night and just couldn't even move. She was drinking ungodly amounts of water and having to go pee like every 5 minutes. And eventually, after a day, of doing this, my parents are like, something's wrong. We got to take her to the doctor. They take her to the doctor, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune condition. I mean, it's where, the beta cells in the pancreas get attacked, which those are responsible for helping to produce insulin. And essentially, her body effectively couldn't produce an insulin response. And so her blood glucose was insanely high. I can't even remember what it was. It had to have been approaching 1,000. Um, anyway, they gave her a diagnosis. They send her home. They tell her you're going to be a diabetic for the rest of your life. You're going to have to take insulin injections, and you're going to have to be mindful about what you're eating. You're going to have to calculate how many carbs are going to be in that meal so that you know how much insulin to use. So I, at a very young age, got to watch her go from completely dysfunctional and, I mean, literally unable to do anything to being a normal human being. And then, going forward, if that dose was too high, it would make her blood sugar drop too low. She would become hypoglycemic, which is also detrimental. High blood sugar or low blood sugar. You kind of want it's kind of one of those Goldilocks things. And, if you got normal health, don't take that for granted that your body is able to respond to both sides of that equation. If you've got low blood sugar, you can, your body will ramp up its own endogenous glucose production through the liver and get you back to a normal state. And if it's too high, the pancreas will get involved and release insulin, and that's a hormone signaling your body to uptake glucose and get it out of the blood so that blood sugar can normalize. Anyway, I got to see that, and so at a very young age, I was very intrigued with medicine and how important it was for certain people when their health just fell out from under them to save them. And so I decided then, and I always loved science and math and chemistry. So it was just kind of the easy option for me to go, you know what? I love this idea that we're helping sick people live normal lives. So putting all that together, I became a pharmacist, and everything was going great. I was the pinnacle of health. I graduated, I was 25 years old, started working as a pharmacist. And just a couple of years into that, I started developing kind of these weird symptoms that were unexplained. And at first, I'm thinking, whatever, I'll just tough it out. I'll walk it off. And then it started getting worse, and I just didn't feel good. I was inflamed. I didn't know I was inflamed, but I was just not feeling all that well. And and then one day I woke up and I had a toothache. And I was 27 years old. I go down to the dentist and I'm like, "Hey, I got a toothache." Okay, let's take a look at it. He gets in there and it needed a filling or something. It was a cavity. So he does that. And when I get home and the numbness wears off, all of a sudden I go to like close my mouth and it's a high tooth. I'd never experienced it. I didn't know what it was like, but this tooth is just it's just before the rest of my teeth are hitting, it's hitting and it's very uncomfortable. It's annoying. And then it started to become painful. I mean, when you try to chew food and that one tooth is just, and none of your other teeth can even touch each other, it's a problem. It's a problem. So I call the dentist and I'm like, "Hey, I don't know what's going on here, but is there something wrong? Like this tooth is hitting early now." And he goes, "Okay, well, we'll get you in a couple of days." And so I get in a couple of days and he kind of brushed it off. Was like, it's not that bad. Let me just, I'll grind it down a little bit and then we'll measure your bite again and see. And even after he ground it down, I could still tell like something's off. But he's like, "Oh, you're normal now. You're fine." So anyway, we went back and forth a couple of times and never got really. I don't feel like we ever truly resolved that. I probably should, in hindsight, just gone to a different dentist, but I just dealt with it and didn't understand that it could lead to some other stuff. Well, and it did. Eventually, my jaw pain it's got real tight. It got real tense, and every day it seemed to just get a little bit worse until finally it became full blown TMJ. TMJ is terrible. I call the dentist and I tell him what's going on. He goes, "Okay, I can't help you. I'm gonna have to refer you to a TMJ specialist." So I go start seeing this TMJ specialist, and um, he when I first get in there, he's like, "Oh yeah, you've definitely got TMJ. So what we're gonna do, what's very effective for a lot of people, is steroids like Medrol." And so he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna give you some oral Medrol and see if that helps." And he did, and it did help. I'm not even gonna say it didn't. It helped. What I didn't realize back then is that it wasn't since it wasn't really hitting the root cause of whatever was causing all this, it wasn't going to last forever. And so I felt great for 2 or 3 days, and then all of a sudden it starts coming back. Well, when I go back in the next time, he's like, "Let's get a little bit more direct. I'm just going to give you a direct Medrol injection right into your TMJ joint, right in my face." I'm like, "Okay, sure." And so we do that, and it did help again. And then we do this several times. I mean, I don't know how many different rounds of Medrol orally and injecting that I did. And every time I did, it brought some temporary relief and then stopped working. And then I've got TMJ again. And finally, it got to the point where I couldn't even open my mouth. And if I could open my mouth, one side of my jaw where the TMJ joint was not working correctly, it was like a hinge that's one side was working fine, the other side wasn't. And so when I would open my mouth, my jaw would just go like over to the, I mean, it just like open and go to the right. And even when I was just trying to have a conversation, every time I would open my mouth, my jaw would it would move to one side. So it really affected me. I was self conscious about it. People noticed it immediately. And so I would try to just not talk very much. So it was really hampering me down. And then not only that, it just hurt. I mean, all day long, all night long, it's hurting. What I didn't realize is in my sleep, I was grinding my teeth, I was biting, I was making it worse. And so eventually I moved to a different town. I moved back to Oklahoma. This was down in Texas. I moved back to Oklahoma. And he goes, "Oh, I'm glad you're moving back to Oklahoma. There's a really good TMJ specialist up there that I think can really help you." And I'm thinking, okay, well, I mean, hopefully you're right. So I go start seeing this new TMJ specialist. And all the while, I mean, like it's that was the chief, that was the main problem, but like the rest of my body is not doing that great either. Like I'm not feeling that great. I don't have energy to work out, so I'm not working out. my diet was all over the place. I was eating the standard American diet, and I was definitely indulging in all the goodness of that. And so that was definitely adding inflammation. And, when you combine that sort of a stressful lifestyle, as a pharmacist, sometimes you stand for 10 hours straight and it demands perfection. You know what I mean? Like you have to make sure the right medicine is going to the right person 100% of the time. There's not like it's not like it's okay if it's you go to a restaurant and they forget to put pickles on your burger or whatever, they can just give you another burger. Who cares? You don't just go back to the pharmacy and they're like, "Oh, I gave you the wrong medicine." That's not okay. So you got to be very diligent, and there's a lot of responsibility there. So it's a pretty stressful job, to be honest with you. And when you add the stress load, and then not good sleep, and then poor diet, and then no exercise, and then that's a vicious kind of a cycle that it gets you on, and it just adds to inflammation and really deteriorating health. And so that's where I kind of found myself. I was going down this slippery slope. And anyway, I go to this new TMJ specialist and he goes, "I don't believe in Medrol. I don't believe in, we're not going to do any of that. We're going to take a natural approach." And I'm thinking, thank God, because it didn't work anyway. And so he tried some various things, but one of the main things that he really, really, really was adamant and hammered into me is that he said, "We're going to use appliances. I'm going to give you a daytime appliance you got to wear in your mouth." It was a mouthpiece and it was, conformed exactly to my teeth. And then there was a nighttime appliance that I had to wear. And they said, "Hey, listen, this is very, very important. You can never go without one of these mouthpieces in. One's got to be in. If it's daytime appliance is in. The only time you can take it out is to brush your teeth. And when you brush your teeth, do not let your teeth touch. If you let them touch this, you could ruin the whole thing." And I'm thinking, wow, it's that dire? Like it's that important that I'd never let my teeth touch? And they're like, absolutely. They said, as soon as you get through brushing your teeth, put that thing right back in your mouth and keep on going. At night, take it out, brush your teeth, put the nighttime appliance in before you go to bed. Do not sleep without it. Don't go without this mouthpiece ever. And I'm thinking, okay, I mean, this TMJ sucks so bad. I'm going to do what you say. Like, if you're telling me this is going to work, I'm going to do it. Now, they did also warn me. They're like, "Hey, by the way, there's a good chance that this could change the structure of your face. Like basically, it could deform it a little bit." And it did slightly. It's not very noticeable, but it did. And maybe that's the magic of it. It just shifted it a little bit. I don't know. Anyway, I do this for 2 or 3 years, and very inconvenient, very annoying, really, because imagine having to eat every single meal you eat, whether it's something crunchy or mushy or whatever it may be, and you've got this mouthpiece. It's kinda like wearing if you ever played football or anything where you had to wear a mouthpiece, think about having to eat with that in your mouth. Not only is it gonna suck, but it's gonna get full of food, it's gonna get nasty, you're gonna have to go rinse it out and then put it back in, so it's got that not so great taste, and I did that for years. Now, I will say, I did get some relief from all of this. It was taking the pressure off of the TMJ joint, and I guess it was maybe changing structure. It was helpful. Now, one day 2 to 3 years into this deal, I'm eating lunch and I bite down. And whenever I did, I just heard crack. And all the way down, it cracked on one side and boom. All the way down to where like my teeth touched. I felt them touch. I immediately panicked. I drop everything. I go grab my phone. Hey, I call over there to this office, to this TMJ office. And I'm like, "Hey, my mouthpiece just broke. I was eating lunch and it cracked all the way down. Y'all told me to never let my teeth touch. This is the first time they've touched in years. Do I need to drop everything and come down there and y'all make a replacement, appliance for me right now?" And they said, "We'll see you in 3 weeks." And I'm like, "Really? Well, if okay." So I just was like, "Okay, well, I guess I'm not gonna wear it. I mean, it doesn't work anyway because it's cracked all the way down." So I took it out, and lo and behold, by the end of the day, my jaw felt fine. My TMJ joint felt fine. I then after a night or two, I'm like, "Do I even need the nighttime appliance?" You know what? I'm gonna stop using both of them and just see if this returns. Now, let me tie in what was also happening this whole time. I finally did decide I was not feeling well at all. I'd gained a ton of weight. I was very chronically fatigued. I had brain fog. I was not in the best mood. It was affecting my personal relationships on so many different levels. And finally, I'm like, "I've had enough. I got to go to the doctor." So I go to this doctor, just a PCP, and I'm like, "Yo, help me. Like, I don't know what the problem is, but I need some help right now, please. And so he runs a battery of tests. And at the end of it, I mean, he checks me for Lyme's disease and all this stuff. And he's like, man, from what I can see, I don't like most of your stuff's pretty clean. Your labs look good. He said the only thing that's off a little bit is you get your thyroid functions a little bit low. Your hypothyroid, you got a little bit of hypothyroidism. So I'm going to give you some thyroid medication. But he said, I'm probably gonna have to refer you out because at this point I had like tingling and numbness in my hands and my feet, and kind of just some weird sensations going on in my body. I didn't really have a loss of strength. It was just kind of like when your arm falls asleep, but it was happening to all my hands and feet pretty regularly. It was very, very annoying. And so he goes, I'm going to refer you to a neurologist. So I go to the neurologist. He runs a whole battery of tests. And at the end of it, he's like, you're strong as a horse. I mean, you do have neurological symptoms, but I don't think this is it's neurological in nature. Like, I don't think the problem is the nerves because you would probably be losing some strength or something otherwise. And that's not happening. And he said, so I really can't help you. He said, I'm going to have to refer you to another specialist. And I'm like, okay, where are we going this time? And he said, I'm going to refer you to a rheumatologist. Now, let me tell you, that was where the real circus began. I did not know what I was walking into when I did that. And so I walk in and, immediately they start testing me and poking me and prodding me. And I just felt like a lab rat. And there was nothing conclusive. Again, we get the lab work done on paper. I'm looking pretty good. And there's no clear way to just say you have this problem. This is your diagnosis. But I've got these things happening in my body and it's very real. So anyway, he decides, okay, let's start treating this, just to see, let's see if it's even responsive to steroids. And so he gives me some prednisone, gives me some Medrol, and let me tell you, very powerful stuff again. And I knew it kind of helped because it helped with my jaw, but I didn't realize. I mean, at this point, I had gotten worse inflammation, and so it was even more impactful whenever he did it. And I felt like a brand new man for about 2 or 3 days. And I'm thinking, oh, God, this is great. Like he's gonna really fix me up. I'm good to go. Well, few days later, it starts wearing off, and here comes all my symptoms back. And so he's like, well, at least it was good news. We found out it's reactive to steroids, which means it is some sort of a reactive arthritis of some sort. And he goes, I'm going to put you, let's try some other stuff. So we move on to the NSAIDs, which are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and kind of like naproxen and ibuprofen, but there's a whole slew of them. And some of them are very potent, and some of them are so potent you can only take them for a few days because they will cause bad outcomes if you take them longer than that. I took every single one of them, and either A, they only kind of worked, or they didn't get along with my liver or my kidneys, or they just didn't work. And so we moved through those. Then we move on to some of these other drugs you probably heard of that are, like methotrexate and hydroxychloroquine. These are used, they're kind of anti-rheumatic agents that go in and they mess with the immune system and kind of, in so doing, it reduces the inflammation because the immune system can't fully do its job. They kind of modulate part of the immune system. So there's a whole class called DMARDs, disease modifying anti-rheumatic drugs, that in one way or another, they modulate the immune system and it can't mount the same response. And so they give you relief. And again, we go through all these, and for one reason or another, they didn't work, or my body didn't like them, my kidneys, liver, whatever. So I go back to him and I'm like, Doc, I'm getting worse. And I've got TMJ, like it's under control with these appliances and all this. But like I've got, can you help me? And he goes, well, we've tried most of about everything we can. It's time for the big guns. And I'm like, the big guns? What are the big guns? And he goes, it's going to be your biologics. We're going to start you out on Imbrel. And again, I'm a pharmacist. So like, I know what these drugs are. I know what their side effects can be, what their risks are. And let me just tell you real quick, when you're getting to that level of medication, that is a very powerful drug. And it's the reason why it's so powerful is instead of just modulating part of the immune response, this actually goes in and just turns the volume of the entire immune system down, and it basically just makes it dysfunctional. For all intents and purposes, it makes it dysfunctional to where it cannot do what it wants to do. And so it does reduce your symptoms, But for that same reason, if you get the common cold or a flu or any sort of infection whatsoever, this could turn into a very serious, this could be fatal because your immune system cannot fight it off. And so number 1, you've got that risk. Number 2, it increases your risk for several types of cancer because again, when you're young and healthy, sometimes you'll get a cell, you'll get a cancerous cell show up quite often, and your immune system has the ability to flag it as cancerous. It's problematic, and it gets rid of it so that it doesn't turn into full-blown cancer. And so you got a lot of risks involved here to use this drug, and it might work. But I was very desperate. I was feeling very, very bad, and I said, "Okay, let's give it a shot." And I will say, that was pretty powerful. That did work. I thought, "Okay, if I can feel like this, like, I can probably stay like, I can stay good." What I didn't realize is those things weren't gonna work forever. And again, they're not treating the root cause. They're treating symptoms of whatever my problem was, and they were reducing those symptoms, but they weren't fixing the problem. And here's how you know, and here's because if I would have stopped taking them, which I had to, every time I got an infection, if I got the flu or whatever, I had to stop taking these medications in order for my immune system to be able to fight it off. And whenever I would do that, my inflammation and all my symptoms of the other crap would come back. So I couldn't win for losing. And so that's how I kind of knew this is not, it's still whatever this drug's doing, it's not getting to the root cause. But it did help, in a very powerful way at that point. It was doing a lot of the heavy lifting because I was still my lifestyle was not good. My diet was still not good. I wasn't sleeping, all that good stuff. I was feeding the inflammation, and so it was keeping it manageable. Well, anyway, when I took out both of those appliances and stopped using them, and to my surprise, a week later, I'm still good. I'm still good, and so I'm like, you know what? I'm done with that. I'm not going back to that TMJ specialist unless my body tells me that I need to go back. Now, let's fast forward from there. I stayed on the Enbrel and it stopped working after probably 6 months. And then we switched to Humira and we go through a whole nother round of all these different, at least half a dozen biologics. And in this, at the same time, I'm developing now I'm getting almost, it's just like a whack-a-mole. There's a new symptom showing up every couple of weeks or whatever. And it just, what was terrible about it is it would show up for the first time ever and then not go away. I'd have this weird ache that would show up in a joint, and it was like barely noticeable on day 1, and by day 3, it was just debilitating. And then all of a sudden, I started getting terrible cervical pain in my neck, right at the top of my neck, right where your skull connects to the top of your spine. I felt like there was just a knife in the back of my head. I had psoriatic lesions popping up on my arms and on the back of my scalp. I had still dealing with the TMJ to some degree, but it was a lot better. I'm not gonna lie. I had a chronic fatigue. I kind of had bloating. I had some GI stuff. I had bilateral ankle swelling. I had several spots on my spine were inflamed, especially my sacroiliac or my SI joint. And because the SI joint got inflamed, my rheumatologist goes, "Oh, you have sacroiliac inflammation. Sacroiliitis is what they call it. It's an inflammatory. It shows that that's where the inflammation is at the SI joint." And he said, "That is classic ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune chronic inflammatory condition that has no cure." And I'm like, "You're sure that's what I got?" And he's like, "Well, yeah. I mean, since you have the SI inflammation, which if you go look at that thing can be inflamed in so many different things. So it definitely was far from enough to be just totally diagnostic to that. But I didn't know that at the time. So I'm like, okay, well, I finally got a diagnosis. That was hard to get there. That took me a long time for you to come up with that diagnosis. So now that we have that, we're going to be able to really get to the root of this problem and eliminate it, and I'm gonna start feeling better. Well, let me just say, I stayed on these drugs for years, and I continued and continued and continued to decline. My cervical pain in my neck got much worse, and finally, I go back to this doc after doing this for probably 6 or 7 years, and I go back to him and I said, "Can you refer me to the Mayo Clinic? Like, I'm not getting better. I am not getting better, and now I've gone through even these big drugs aren't working. These biologics aren't working. Can you refer me to the Mayo Clinic just so I can get a second opinion? He's like, sure. So he refers me. I drive up there. I take a week off work and spend, I'm a lab rat again. They're poking and prodding and testing and scanning and imaging and doing everything they can to me. And at the end of the week, however many days I was there, I'm sitting in the room with the doctor, which he was also a rheumatologist, and he's dictating into the mic, just kind of his commentary on what's going on. And I heard him say this. He said, I'm at a disadvantage because this patient comes to me with a prior diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis. I about came out of that chair. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? You're at a disadvantage because some doctor in Oklahoma said that that's what I had, and even that was kind of shoddy. Like there was no clear diagnostic thing. He looked at like a list of 14 or 16 criteria, and I had like 7 or 8 of them. And so he's like, you've got 7 or 8, so we're just gonna call it ankylosing spondylitis. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Why couldn't you just, you're the Mayo Clinic. Why can't you just treat me like a blank slate? Why can't I just come in here? Even if you know what that diagnosis is, why couldn't you just come to your own conclusion and see if it matched that one? And if it did, that's very helpful to me. And if it doesn't, that's also very helpful to me. I need to know this information. But when he said he was at a disadvantage, I just wanted to come out the chair. Now, I just sat there and kept listening. And he finally got down and he said, this patient does have sacroiliitis. And because of that, we are going to stick with the diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis. So I left there with that, which I was pretty deflated. I'm not going to lie. I was upset because I honestly thought I was going to get something better from there. But on the drive home, it was a long drive home, like a 15-hour drive home. I got to really stew on it and think about it. And I said, okay, you know what? At least he didn't say I didn't have it. So clearly it wasn't just something else. I don't feel like this is super helpful, but I'm just going to accept it. And I'm going to come home and start trying to do any and everything that I can to help with this. And so at this point, I start doing anything. I start looking into mindfulness and meditation, and I'm trying all these weird diets. There was one called the Autoimmune Protocol, and there was, obviously you got paleo and you got keto and you got the no starch diet. There's so many of them out there. And I tried them, and some of them would come, they'd have an impact to some degree. But the main thing that was really killing me then was the pain, was literally the pain in my neck, right at the top there, knife in my head. Could not get rid of that pain, and I didn't want to take pain medication, and it's personal reasons for that. But first and foremost, because I'm a pharmacist, and over the years I could just see it's not addressing root cause. It's not curing them. Like they don't take it for a month and then they get off of it. They get on it and now they're on it and they're on it. And if they ever stop taking it, they're in detrimental pain. I didn't want to do that. And so I was looking for a permanent solution. I was looking for a root cause solution. And so a few years later, I go to my normal just PCP for just Alex. She was just giving me Flonase. And I'm in there sitting with her and for my annual visit. And she goes, hey, is there anything else I can help you with? And I just jokingly, I said, you know what? If you can do something about this pain in my neck, and I don't want pain medicine, that's not what I want. If you can really get rid of it, hey, well, I'll give you $10,000. I mean, I'm like that desperate. If you can help get rid of this, because I knew that if I could get rid of that, I could sleep better. And that if I could start sleeping better, that would be great for my health. And she's like, well, let's do some imaging. And I'm like, uh, I've done 500 different, scans. I've done, CAT scans and MRIs and X-rays and all this. And every time they come back, oh, it's just there's no problem. It's normal. And that's probably one of the most frustrating parts is during that whole process when I would go do lab work, it was all clean on paper. I'm clean. They look at it. Oh, you're good on here. And I'm thinking, I don't care what that paper says. I know how I feel, and I know how I used to feel when I didn't have this problem, and I feel terrible. Like there is something wrong. You're not doing the right test or something. I don't know. And then whenever they do imaging and say the same thing, it was very frustrating. So I'm like, okay, she says, well, let's just do another one. So we go do another one. A couple days later, this is where it kind of got interesting. I got a phone call while I was at work, and it was from a local number that I didn't recognize. So I answered the phone, and it was her calling me from her personal cell phone. And she tells me, and I'm like, is this your personal phone? She's like, yeah, I wanted to get in touch with you immediately. And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, I don't want to scare you or anything, but," and I'm like, "Too late. You already did, but let's hear it, you know?" And she goes, "Listen, I'm not a radiologist, but I'm looking at this scan that we just did, and even I can look at this and tell you've got a major problem. You've got significant erosion," was her words, "at C1 and C2. You're the two highest vertebra on your entire spine. It's literally where the spine connects to your skull." And I'm like, "Erosion? What is that? What causes that? What do we do?" And she's like, "That's the thing. I have no idea what's causing it. I don't know this is kind of out of my scope." She said, "But this is the reason I wanted to call you so urgently." She said, "The risk that it brings here is," she said, "just like the difference between a paraplegic and a quadriplegic, depending on what part of your spine fractures, if you get a she said, "Up there, those vertebrae are becoming so brittle from the erosion that I'm afraid they're going to fracture quite easily. Like if you're roughhousing, if you're playing basketball and you get hit in the head, if you get rear-ended in your car, whatever it may be, if you take some head trauma, that could fracture." And she said, "And just like depending on how high up it determines, where how you're affected." She said, "Let me just put it this way: your respiration is controlled through C3." And immediately I'm like, "Wait, wait, wait. Are you saying what I think you're saying?" And she's like, "Yes, I'm saying that if you take a fracture there, it's likely could be it'll be fatal because you won't be able to breathe." She said, "If it was like C4, you it's still a big deal, you could end up being a quadriplegic, but this is fatal. It could be." So she said, "I've already referred you to a neurosurgeon. You need, get up there as soon as you can. In the meantime, no sports, no horse playing, no nothing." And I'm like, "Okay, well, thank you, for letting me know." And I mean, detrimental. This was my rock bottom moment because at this point, I'm desperate. You got to understand, I've got three little boys at home at this point. I think they were all under the age of 5. I'm the main provider for the household because my wife, who's also a pharmacist, was basically a stay-at-home mom to take care of our children, and she was playing a very important role there, and I was in no state, I was not healthy at all to really be doing that at that time. And so this was big deal. So I called my wife, and I mean, we're both just like, "Oh my God, like what are we gonna do here?" And so anyway, I go see the neurosurgeon few days later, and he was looking at that imaging and he confirmed it. He goes, "Yeah, she's right. I mean, like you do have this erosion going on. It's pretty significant." He said, it's hard to understand what's causing it." He said, "Because most of the time when you get this inflammation in these vertebrae and these joints, what the body really normally tries to do is it tries to fuse, not just naturally, it fuses them together." He said, "But in your case, it's like the opposite. Yours are eroding away." And I'm like, "How? No one knows. Like, am I like the first person this has ever happened to? I don't." And I said, "Okay, well, what do we do?" And he goes, "Well, normally, if we have something going on in the cervical spine, especially if it's lower down around C3, 4, 5, whatever, we'll go in and I can do a nerve block. And if that helps you tremendously because the pain's gone, then I can go in and I can ablate that nerve branch that's coming off the central nerve. And then that fixes your problem and you can go on and have a normal life." He said, "Here's the problem. At C1 and C2, we can't do that because even if I gave you a nerve block and it worked, there are no branches coming off of the central nerve at that high up." And he said, I cannot ablate your spine, your central spinal cord. That'll kill you." So he said, "That's not an option." And I'm like, "Okay, then what do we do?" And he said, "Well, the only other thing, intervention that we could do is an extremely invasive surgery where if we go in," he said, "number one, it's guaranteed it's going to bring a whole ton of collateral damage because we got to cut through a whole bunch of nerves and muscles and all kinds of stuff to get in there." And he said, "You're also going to, if we do this surgery, you will lose 90% range of motion up, down, left, and right." And I'm thinking, so my head's, barely even going to be able to move. And I'm like, "Doc, there is no chance in hell we're doing that. So I ain't doing that. Are you kidding me?" And he's like, "No, I wouldn't even suggest it." And I'm like, "Then why are we talking about it?" He said, "Well, it's a last resort. If you continue to get worse and this erosion doesn't stop, we may have no choice but to go in there. And he said, all I'm going to do is fuse the joint. So he said, I want to give your body the chance to fuse on its own, but we're going to have to. I said, then what do we do? He said, we're just going to have to do imaging, periodically, either monthly or every 3 months, and see if we're getting better or worse, and kind of go from there. So I was distraught at this point because this is pretty dire. I am thinking, I'm too young to die. What is going on? Why am I not getting any help? I am doing what these doctors are saying. I am the most compliant patient that there ever was, because I fully believed that that medicine was going to save my life the way that, my little sister who used insulin, it gave her life back. I was fully convinced. And I'm a pharmacist. So, like, I spent a lot of years of my life, a lot of my money, a lot of my time, a lot of my effort and blood, sweat, and tears getting that PharmD degree. And so I was very much, dedicated to it. I thought it would work. Well, at this point, now that I've been driven all the way to rock bottom, this is when I finally got desperate. This is when I finally said, you know what? I'm going to start trying stuff, even if I'm 100% sure it is not going to work. I'm going to start trying to find answers elsewhere. And so I did. And I did some pretty crazy diets back then. At one point, I knew that there was a dietary component to it, because I knew if I ate just straight junk food, I felt so much worse. And then if I, sort of, especially the low starch and some of those, I knew there was a tie there, but I hadn't put it all together yet. And so, anyway, at this point, had just, I was, I'd always wanted to run my own, I always wanted to have my own pharmacy. And that was a dream of mine even before I ever, was out of pharmacy school. I met my wife in pharmacy school, and I told her then, like, hey, I one day I want to own my own pharmacy. I want to have an independent pharmacy. So I went ahead and did that, because time's of the essence. I may not be here much longer. So I quit my corporate job. I went and opened my own pharmacy. It was in July 2019, 6 months before a global pandemic was about to ravage the planet. Didn't know that. So that was an interesting time to start a new business. But interestingly enough, I had some customers that were coming in, and they were looking for, it's a class of over-the-counter supplements called nutraceuticals, which they're just really high-grade supplements that are basically held to the same pharmaceutical standards as prescription drugs, as far as, like, they're clean, they're tested, they're proven, like, there's no fillers, they're really good. And they were driving, 45 minutes away to another pharmacy to buy these things, and they were tired of driving an hour and a half to go up there and get this stuff. And so they brought the bottle in. They said, hey, can you get this stuff? I'm tired of driving all the way hour and a half to get it. I'm already here. I just get it from you if you can get it. So I'd never even heard of these things until then, but I went ahead, okay, hopped on the website, filled out the application, ordered in what they wanted. And before you know it, I had several patients like, oh, you carry that? Yeah, I buy that. Okay, I'll start getting it here. And so it kind of grew. And then I also got to see that it was actually helpful. It's people were taking this stuff, and they were coming back and giving me very, very, very positive feedback. And so anyway, one day I have the nutraceutical rep for the company come through my front door at my pharmacy, and she's talking all this big stuff. And it was an entertaining conversation. And she goes, yeah, and I've cured a few dozen people of RA, rheumatoid arthritis. And I'm thinking, lady, you don't know who you're talking to right now. You don't know. I've got an autoimmune diagnosis. It's a very close cousin to RA, and it's incurable. What are you talking about? You've cured people. What? Stop. I said, okay, but whatever. I didn't say any of that. I said, okay, you know what? I've got some people I think you could help. You got a business card by chance? So she gave me her business card. I went and found her email address on there. I went and typed up my story on an email, but I told her it was somebody's grandpa. And just to take the personalness out of it. And she said, I said, what does he need to do? And she goes, oh, he needs to go see this doctor up in another city in Oklahoma. And I'm thinking, okay, so you're not actually the one doing it, but hey, as long as you're pointing people there, that's great. I'm glad that you're doing that. So I go look up his doctor. He was an MD, just like any other MD on the planet. He had some additional training in integrative and functional medicine, which at that point I didn't know much about. And So I booked the appointment, super skeptical it's going to work. I'm like, if the Mayo Clinic couldn't do it, what's the chances of this guy being able to do something? So I go in here and I tell him my entire story that I just told you. And he goes, man, you got a complex story. He said, first of all, I just want to do normal lab work. And he said, but on top of that, I want to test you I want to do a comprehensive food sensitivity serum. So it's a blood test panel. And I'm thinking, I was like, "Really?" And he's like I was like, "Man, do you know how many doctors I've been to over the past decade plus, including all the way to the Mayo Clinic, and not a single doctor has ever said what you just said?" Sure. I mean, this kind of seems off the beaten track, but let's do it. So I go do this food test and this blood test, and of course, I get the regular labs back in a couple of days, and of course they were fine. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. Like no answers. And really, I kind of forgot about it because like a couple of months went by before these results finally came in. And finally, I get a message saying I got a text saying you got a portal message through this new doctor. And I'm like, I forgot about that. Let me go see what he had to say. So I log in, I had to check it. And you got to understand, my first visit with this guy, I mean, super clean, super professional. And then whenever I open this and I read the opening line, I'm like, he said, holy shit, you are allergic to everything. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? So I open it up thinking it's going to be a one pager. It's a 17-page report breaking down all different types of food groups, your veggies, your fruits, your legumes, your nuts, your berries, various other plants and animal proteins and fats. And even when it was talking, it didn't just say like cow's milk. It would do like casein and lactose and cow's milk and sheep's milk and all these different types of things. And then what it would do is it would give you it had three different pathways that you could essentially be sensitive or allergic to these foods, which are your IgE, IgG, and C3D. And that's just three different pathways that you can be allergic to something. And it gave a numerical number and a color coding. And the color coding was kind of like a stoplight. It had green, yellow, and red. Green means you can eat this food, no problem. Yellow means this might be a problematic food. And red means don't touch this with a 10-foot pole because it's definitely problematic. And then if you go all the way down to the end of the report on the last page, it said it gave a less restrictive and a more restrictive diet. Basically, an elimination diet, getting rid of all these problematic foods that this report is saying are problematic or could be problematic. And his advice, he said, I would start with the less restrictive diet. So I read that report and I'm like, I looked at the less restrictive and then I looked down at the more restrictive and I'm like, doc, you don't understand. I want as much relief from this as I want to get as far away from this problem as I possibly can. I've been living in hell, you know. I said, I'm doing the more restrictive diet. If you would have called me and told me to stand on my head and drink vinegar through my nose 3 times a day, I would have done that with a smile. That's how desperate I was. I would have done that happily if that would have worked. So I looked down at this more restrictive diet and I'm kind of in disbelief at how short this list is of the things that this report is saying that I can eat. And I remember just being completely shocked because the first thing I thought is, what did I eat for lunch yesterday? Was it good or bad based on this report? And I remember because at this point I was overweight, 40 to 50 pounds overweight. I was very swollen, very inflamed, all kinds of problems head to toe. And I was trying to lose weight. So I remember telling, my wife was helping me as well. And so she brought me lunch that day. And what it was a salad that it had spinach, it had lettuce, I think it had some asparagus, it had maybe sun-dried tomatoes, it had walnuts, it had some olive oil, and a few other things on there. And then it had some grilled salmon on there. And I go find each one of these things on this report, and I can't make this up. Every single thing on that except for the grilled salmon, was red as could be. Like it was on my no list. You cannot touch this. And then I'm like, lettuce? What? How can lettuce? There's not even any calories in lettuce. That's why people eat it, is so they can eat it and kind of feel full and not have calories and so they can lose weight. How can that be problematic? Sure enough, there it was, and then they had more than one type they had iceberg and romaine and all these different lettuces on there, and all of them were bad. And I'm in total disbelief. And so when I look at this more restrictive diet, it's basically saying, bro, all you can eat is animal proteins, animal fat, some dairy products, and a few like there were like two veggies or that I had never heard of. Literally, I didn't even know what they were. And I'm thinking, if I've never heard of those, I'm not gonna go find them and eat them. And then again, there was like an exotic fruit or two on there that wasn't, it wasn't apples, bananas, and strawberries. Those were bad. It was stuff I'd never heard of. And I'm thinking, okay, so this is basically saying carnivore. And I'd heard of this diet. I'd heard of it. I was very skeptical of it. And I'm thinking, this report is telling me to cut out all these foods and just eat basically animal products. And so at that point, I started trying to learn as much as I could about it. I went and Googled it, and I found a book called The Carnivore Diet, which was written by Dr. Sean Baker. He's an MD. And so as soon as I read that, I'm like, oh, an MD wrote this book. He Okay, well, then at least maybe he can break it down, give me the science for why it's gonna work. And I will say, that was an eye-opening book, and by the end of it, I was fully convinced I'm at least gonna try this diet. It just happened to be at the end of the year. We had New Year's right around the corner, so I told my wife, starting on New Year's Day, I'm gonna try this diet for 30 days, or at least or for January, for January, and we're gonna see if it helps at all. And I was 100% convinced that I was either going to be chronically constipated, or my heart health was going to start to decline, or my lipid, my lipid panel is going to get out of whack, or I'm going to have colon cancer, or whatever. All this stuff that you hear that's associated, with meat. I had learned all that as well. It was very deep within me. There was a fear present, but I said, you know what? It's not as scary as dying, so I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna give it 30 days. Let me tell you right now, 2 weeks into that diet, 2 weeks into that diet, I felt the inflammation going down for the first time in over a decade in a more powerful way than even when I was on Enbrel and Humira and the quote unquote big guns. I'm talking 2 weeks on this diet, and I felt that much better. All my symptoms are getting better. My sleep's getting better. Everything. My inflammation, I'm losing weight. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, there's almost no chance I'm stopping this in 30 days. And sure enough, we get to 30 days, I do another 30. We do that 30, I do another 30. I said, I'm doing at least another 90. I feel better than I have since I was a teenager. I do another 90. Now we're at the 6-month mark. A lot of my symptoms are going away, not just getting better, but they're like going away. The pain in my neck, the psoriatic lesions, the swelling in my ankles, the gut issues, the chronic fatigue. I'm getting mental clarity. I'm sleeping better. Everything, every aspect, my relational health with other people, my financial health, every bucket of health that you could break it down into was getting better. So I looked at her and I said, I've already done half a year and I cannot believe how good I feel. I'm finishing out this year. I've already done, I've been strict carnivore for 6 months. Let's do it. And I'm not kidding you. By the end of that year, I had completely come off of all medications from my rheumatologist. I was still going to the rheumatologist, but I wasn't taking anything because I didn't need it. I was symptom free. I didn't need anything to treat the symptoms, and so I didn't take it. And anyway, at that point, I'd lost 50 to 60 pounds. I was now sleeping much better. I wanted to work out. I didn't just wake up and like, oh, I got to go to the gym. It's like, I want to go to the gym. Like, I actually feel good. I want to go to the gym. I wanted to go play outside in the yard with my kids again, and I wasn't able to do that whenever I was debilitated. I was optimistic. I was looking forward to things. I was thriving. Honestly, it felt like a nightmare had ended because you got to understand when you're under that systemic chronic inflammation, those systemic chronic inflammatory diseases like autoimmune things, autoimmune arthritis, those are appropriately named because literally the root word of inflammation is flame. You feel like you are on fire from the inside. Like there's pain, you are swollen, you are agitated, there is no relief. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you're compliant on your medications or how many different doctors you go to or how many different supplements you try that's supposed to be the next quick fix or all these different things. It's terrible. It is hell. It literally feels like hell on earth. It's a nightmare. And I've been there. I've been there. And because I've been there, when I got a taste of good health again, Oh my goodness. I got a second lease on life I didn't think I was gonna get. I was in disbelief. I mean, I literally couldn't believe the benefits I had gotten from doing one simple thing, and it wasn't adding anything. It was actually removing a lot of things and letting my body do the healing, do that on its own. So, anyway, after that first year, I couldn't believe the results of that. Well, I go back to the rheumatologist, and I'm having the conversation, and we got to talking about the C1 and the C2, and I said, by the way, C1 and C2 eroding, is that like a classic feature of ankylosing spondylitis that I missed? Because I've done a lot of research on it since y'all diagnosed me with that, and I've never come across that. And the response was, "Oh no, that's classic RA." Classic what? Now I got RA too? What are you talking about? And then I showed, at one point we had discussed the psoriatic lesions, and I'm like, what about this? And they were like, oh, well, that's actually that's a common symptom in psoriatic arthritis. And I'm thinking, which one do I have here? Like you're throwing around all these, and they said, well, it really doesn't matter because we treat them all the same. And I'm thinking, you just what? How many different things are lumped into this? So anyway, when I go back and I'm feeling great and I've lost all this weight and I mean, rheumatologist is like, wow. So wow, you look good. Like what's going on? And I'm like, well, I changed diets and did an elimination diet. And I knew they weren't going to be supportive of it. So I didn't even say anything about carnivore. I just said, I'm just doing a zero carb, high fat, uh, and protein diet. And I'm removing all the processed garbage. I'm removing all your seed oils. I'm removing artificial flavors and sweeteners and sugars and grains and and basically I was describing it by saying everything it wasn't. And she goes, oh, well, I see this report here where you had all this significant erosion going on in C1 and C2. Have you done another image since then? I'm like, no, I mean, it doesn't hurt. So I don't really care as long as the pain's gone. And so she said, well, I kind of want to see it. And I'm like, why? And she's like, yeah, I just want to see it. I just want to see what it looks like after all this time. And I was like, okay, well, let's do it. Well, we did it. And to my shock, and I'm gonna have to get my medical records from them so that I can see it. But to my shock, the radiology report showed normal anatomical structure, like almost like it had healed itself, like it had regrown the whatever. And that's all it said. It said there's no problem here. And I'm thinking, what? What? I knew the pain was gone, but now you're telling me on this radiology report or on this scan that now it's just gone back to normal function? And I mean, range of motion and pain and I mean, my TMJ, like everything's gone. And so it felt like a miracle. It felt like a miracle. And so after that, I started telling everybody I could about how good this was. Called my dad and I'm like, Dad, this I thrive on this carnivore diet. He's a cattle rancher, like I said. So he's just like, oh, we got to keep you stocked with that. So anyway, that story is the reason why I am the way I am today. It's the reason why I started CarnivRx. It's the reason why I've started this podcast. It's been that impactful. And since then, I have tried various times. I've tried numerous times to try to reintroduce some of the old foods that I eat for the better part of 30 years I could eat with no problem whatsoever. And every time I do, it brings back some inflammation and it starts to bring back some of those old dormant symptoms that have been dead. And I'm like, oh, no, we're not playing that game. And so what it is, it allowed me to basically grab the bull by the horns on this condition, on this chronic inflammation. And anytime that, whether it's a special occasion or an anniversary or birthday or holiday or whatever, if I choose to eat something that tastes good. It's really not going to be good for my health, but it tastes good and I choose to do it. And I know I'm going to suffer for the next 2 to 3 days from an inflammatory flare. Sometimes I'll still do that, and I'll enjoy every bite of it. I'm not going to sit there and feel guilty for eating it if I choose to eat it, but I always know I can come back and do this diet and reel it back in. And so like, hey, after about a year and a half and not needing to take anything from the rheumatologist, I completely fired my rheumatologist, and to this day, I don't even take a baby aspirin for inflammation. Again, it's been that impactful to my life. And so since then, I've been pretty vocal. Again, I'm a pharmacist, so I got people coming in all the time. And you know, it bothered me after I got out of school. And I've talked to several of my colleagues to see if they share the same opinion. But I mean, if you talk to almost any healthcare professional, the reason why they wanted to become one is because they wanted to help people, sick people get better. They wanted to, not just get them to take a pill for the rest of their life, but to actually fix the problem so that they can have optimal health so that they can enjoy their life. And, before I went into pharmacy school, I thought that's what I was going to be doing because classic case, my younger sister and insulin gave her life back. And and then I got out and I realized that the vast majority of these medications, after been dispensing them for 5 years to these people, and I've been watching to see, are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Are they getting off these medications? Or are they basically, once they start them, they have to take them for the rest of their lives? That's what was happening. They were coming in, they were going, and finally one day, they kind of like my story, they get sick, go to the doctor, they'd run some diagnostic thing on them, they'd put them on a pill, and then, 6 months, a year later, you talk to them, "Hey, you feeling better? Like, how is this drug working? Are you feeling better?" And they're like, "I'm really not. Like, and now I got this new side effect that's bothering me." Well, we go back to the doctor and tell them about the side effect. Well, that doc, has a pill for the side effect. There are pills for, let's say it causes acid reflux. Well, there's plenty of different classes of medications that'll treat that and it will work. It'll reduce the stomach acid. But at the same time, that comes with downstream effects because when you reduce the acidity of the pH of your stomach the way it should be, it can't absorb nutrients and vitamins and minerals the way that it would if it was in its natural state. And so that can lead to deficiencies down the road, which can turn into it's a cascade. And so what I love about what carnivore does is it's just so simple. You're not bringing anything more in, you're actually taking away. It's so simple. It's just so simple because it's giving your body adequate protein and adequate fats and with nothing extra. It's giving your body exactly what it needs to thrive and nothing more. And it's actually that the magic is not in the meat. The magic is in the absence of all the other problematic things that can be detrimental to your health, especially if they go in and they cause inflammation. Inflammation is basically the root of all disease. Now, if you trace it back far enough, some inflammation, whether it's atherosclerosis, whether it's Parkinson's or some neurodegenerative disease, whether it's diabetes, whether it's, blood pressure problems or arthritis, it's inflammation. It's inflammation. Even, your thyroid, anything that has the word itis at the end of it. I mean, just think about it. Arthritis, thyroiditis, bursitis. There's so many, like, if it has that at the end, that literally means inflammation. And when it turns into a chronic inflammatory thing, and let me tell you the difference. I mean, there's a difference between a bee sting causing inflammation, which is an acute response, and you actually want that to happen. If you cut yourself or burn yourself or get stung or something like that, you want that inflammation because what it does is it brings all these blood cells and white blood cells, red blood cells, all kinds of factors. And yes, it swells and it gets red and puffy, but because it's bringing all that stuff in there, it starts the healing process. And that's where the healing comes from. And when it's acute, it's beneficial because it solves the problem, and then it goes away. When it's chronic, that's when it causes major problems, especially if it's systemic, because if you have systemic chronic inflammation, it will affect your entire body, including your brain, like your internal organs, your joints, your spine, your skin, everything. I mean, everything. And you never know what's going to happen next. And before you know it, you're just completely lost at sea in this disease, and you're basically just like a zombie of your former self because you don't have the energy to do anything, and you're pretty hopeless. It's easy to get depressed. It's easy to be anxious because you're worried that it's just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And so, guys, that's my story. I mean, that's what literally happened to me. I, I, I I don't know why. All I can do is piece it together now and know that I'm in a position now to share that story. And I know that there's a lot of people. And the reason I know this is because I have conversations with patients on a daily basis at my pharmacy talking about these things, very similar things where they get labeled with this chronic autoimmune disease that there's no cure for and told that there's no hope and that they just slowly decline. And even with the drugs, it's not saving them. Well, guys, if you know anybody that's in that boat, that's who this message is for. I'm trying to reach the people who are hopeless, who know exactly what I went through, because I had to reach level 10 on a 10 of 10 scale of desperation, you know, and willingness to try things that even I didn't believe in, regardless of what my doctor said, regardless of what I've learned in pharmacy school or read on the internet. There's so much conflicting information out there. If you know anybody who's to that point and willing to give it a try, I would use this. I mean, I really would. It's that powerful. It's that good. And even, maybe a year down the road or whatever, you can reintroduce some other foods back in and get away with it. I mean, I'm still on a quest to try to fully heal my gut. There's clearly something going on with my gut that's leading to the inflammation. And if I can fully heal it and be able to bring back, I'm still not going to go. There's no way I'm going to go back to eating sugar and grains and processed or ultra processed and artificial sweeteners and preservatives. I'm not doing that because it's a fact. Like, it's not even debatable. It's terrible for your health. But um, I might bring back some whole food options, some single ingredient whole food options at some point. But if I never do, trust me, I am so happy to have my life back, to have my health back, to be able to be the father and the husband and the friend and the pharmacist and the colleague and all the other hats that I have to wear at the top of my game and not just be surviving through a day as a zombie anymore. Guys, I mean, honestly, even for my spirituality, it's helped so much because I'm so grateful for not only getting a second lease on life, but I'm grateful for the experience that I had to go through, because now I'm in a unique position where I can share this story and I can help people. And if I can do that, guys, there's nothing bigger than that. There's nothing bigger. So anyway, guys, this has been the first. I wanted to share my story on the very first episode of the very first podcast. And I hope that's been beneficial to you guys. If it has, please, please, please share this, subscribe, tell people to come listen to this. If you think it could be impactful at all, leave a comment, get in contact with me. I would love nothing more than to sit down and have a conversation. We can hop on a one-on-one, totally, no strings attached, free of charge. I just want to help you. Okay. So anyway, guys, thanks for listening to me today. And until next time, stay good. And always remember this. This is one truth that I came across after all of that. This is what I'll leave on. Now, when I sit down and I look at something that's very tempting, like say it's a cookie or a cupcake or ice cream or something that I absolutely love, I always have to ask this question. Is this 3 minutes of pleasure going to be worth 3 days of torture? And after doing that countless times, I finally realized that nothing tastes better than good health. All right. Till next time, guys. Stay good. See you next time.